I feel like. Anyway, appreciate Eric filling in through my recovery, more of recovery than I anticipated. And so anyway, then last week we scheduled to be out of town. There's supposed to be a gap between the surgery and being out of town, but surgery got moved, so anyway. Proverbs chapter 17 is where we are headed this evening. Proverbs chapter 17, and we're going to begin in verse 11 tonight. And so I would ask if there was any questions or comments from last time, but we don't even remember where we're at, do we? All right, Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 11 here. It says, an evil man seeks only rebellion, therefore a cruel messenger will be sent against him. And so we think about this. Let's see, I started in the wrong verse. Verse 10 threw me off. All right, verse 10 says, rebuke is more effective for a wise man than 100 blows on a fool. And so we're talking about in this verse two types of individuals. I think this verse is pretty easy to understand, isn't it? We're talking about a wise man versus a hard-headed man, aren't we? And so when we look at this, rebuke is more effective for a wise man. What is rebuke?
Being told you did something wrong.
Okay. Correction, right? Instruction, right? The idea of becoming informed is what we're trying to do. Inform a person about their situation or their decisions or their actions. It's more effective. Some of the things, as far as commentators go, that they were talking about was, and I thought the way they put this was good, is it sank in deeper, right? It sinks in deeper. Then what? The rebuke sinks in deeper for a wise man than what? 100 blows to a fool, right? You think about that. When Jesus was talking to the Pharisees, what are some words that he described or used to describe them and the rejection of him and what he was trying to teach? Anybody think of any words that he used? Okay. I was thinking stiff-necked, right, and uncircumcised in heart. But the idea of being stiff-necked was what? Bullheaded, right? Okay. They didn't want to hear, didn't want to listen, take heed to these things. So we understand this verse and what it's talking about. Fool is not set straight by mere instruction, are they? Right? Okay, comments? Questions? All right, verse 11 says, an evil man seeks only rebellion, therefore a cruel messenger will be sent against him. An evil man seeks to do what?
Stir up trouble.
Okay, stir up trouble or only seeks rebellion, right? You're not going to tell me what to do, how to live. You're not going to tell me what's right or wrong. And so their goal in life is to do what? Cause problems or disobey the rules, right? I think about attitudes of some individuals that are in the world. A lot of times they end up behind bars, right? Because what? What's their attitude? You're not going to tell them. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. So when we looked at this, an evil man, their goal in life is to seek rebellion, to go against the rules, okay? And we think about that. I thought about 1 John, and I really don't want to spend a lot of time dwelling on 1 John. But we think about that the Christian, are we going to stumble and fall along the way? Okay. This man, an evil man, is going to do what? Choose to continue to sin. Versus a Christian, we may sin along the way, but when we realize it, even David, with the terrible things David did, with Bathsheba and killing her husband, all those things, when Nathan came to him and he came to his senses, what did he do? He said, well, nobody's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to live a rebellious life. No, he changed it, and he shows the condition of the heart. So then we see that type of individual, the second half of this verse, therefore a cruel messenger will be sent against him, right? What's he going to face in life? Okay. difficulties, okay? This word cruel can be translated as terrible, the proper translation, right? And so what he's doing is he's paving the way for difficult times. Go to Romans chapter 13 real quick. And I think this is Romans chapter 13 verse 1 begins, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities. Okay? Be subject to the governing authorities. We go back and we look at what we're talking about in Proverbs. What are we talking about? An evil man seeks only what? Rebellion. Is he the individual that's going to heed to the governing authorities? No. So then when you jump ahead and you look at verse 2, it says, therefore whosoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring what? Judgment on who? Themselves, right? You want to drive 100 miles down the interstate and then be upset when you get pulled over. Whose fault was it?
Buy some more asphalt.
Buy some more. Anyway, and so here, when you keep going in Romans chapter 13, in verse 3, it says, for rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. And so if we choose a rebellious lifestyle, what are we also choosing? A difficult life. Okay. All right. We need to talk about this more. We understand? Okay. How many of us have been rebellious? Most of the time it's at home with our parents. So what do our parents try to do? Train us out of it. Okay. All right. Verse 12 says, let a man meet a bear robbed of her cubs rather than a fool in his folly. Oh. What's the mindset of a bear robbed of cubs?
Get tore up.
Yeah. Yeah. Angry, mad, seeking vengeance. Okay. And so we understand that this is a fierce situation, don't we? And then we see here is that a man that meets this bear is better off to meet that bear than what? Yeah, right. If you see a bear, you want to pet it? Okay. If you see a bear, an angry bear, you don't want to pet it. You understand the danger there. But here, it's better to meet that than what? A fool in his folly. Why a fool? Why is it more dangerous? Sometimes you don't realize that this is a fool that has... What's folly? Okay, foolishness, recklessness, right? And so they're going to try to scheme a way to trick you into helping them. What I typed here is, put in my notes, it says, a fool is dangerous in his crafty pursuit of self-indulgence, right? Because what are they going to do? They're all for them and nothing for you, and they're going to try to pull the wool over your eyes to overcome you. And I haven't been sharing section, we've been moving on. Verse 11, I put in my notes section 29, and section 29, and that was going to be judgment, was where I put it. And then verse 12, I put 2 here, and that's the folly of fools. That's what's talked about here. All right, any questions, comments? All right. Verse 13 says, whoever rewards evil for good, evil will not depart from his house. I think we've mentioned probably a month ago, last time I taught, was the idea of Obadiah. And one of the things that the Edomites in the book of Obadiah were condemned for was they stood by and watched injustice happen. Okay, what this is an example of injustice. Whoever rewards bad or terrible things for good, or what do we see here? Evil will not, difficulty, trouble will not depart from his house. And so when we think about this, we understand judgment will come on the house of the wicked, right? Is it always in our time? Okay. And we're going to look at this more in a couple verses. We'll reference this back. But the thing is, do we know the difference between good and bad? And right or wrong? In this world, honestly, does wrong always get punished the way it ought to, and right always get rewarded the way it ought to? No. Matt says, no way. He knows, right? Well, we're young people. He knows. And so here, Solomon's writing against that. And so we come, I put section 29 because judgment's going to come across against them. So we come to verse 14. It says, the beginning of strife is like releasing water. Therefore, stop contention before a quarrel starts. A lot of you guys know I'm a visual person, right? So what do you visualize here? What are we talking about? The releasing of water. I imagine this big dam that has a little squirt out of the bottom, right? I think that open season, I'm not expert on movies, but I think in open season there's a scene where a dam gets a hole in it and blows open. I may be wrong. Maybe wrong movie. But what happens with that hole? Does it automatically fix itself?
It's going to erode away and get bigger if it doesn't get fixed.
Get bigger and bigger until the dam fails. And so there's actually a documentary I watched, talks about our nation's dams and the age and the problems we have because we've had several dams fail in our nation as a result of this very thing, the same concept. And it's not, the problem isn't that it just drained the lake. The problem is once the leak started, it didn't stop until it blew out the dam, right? It wasn't that it drained the lake as we think about. It blew out the dam and washed out towns below and people died. And so when you think about that concept in relation to this, it says the beginning of strife is like releasing of water. He saw the very beginning of something. He says here in the second half of the verse, he says, therefore what? What do we need to do? Stop it, okay? Because in my mind, I visualize this dam with this little squirt that you can walk up and hold your thumb over or stick your finger in, say, hey, it's done, right? Now we got to figure out a way to fix this that I don't have to hold my finger here. But the idea is, once it starts, it's not something that will just dissipate over time. It's going to blow out. And it was going to be uncontrollable, the consequences of it. Words, phrases we might use, I thought about was a snowball effect. Okay, so we think about this when dealing with one another, dealing with the congregation, those sorts of things. And so,
When you look at that, it could be like a blender effect, actually. You know, the way he's stating it about people that are doing evil and doing things wrong. You know, a leak starts small, but the blender, you get to throw bad people in the good, what happens?
yeah, just,
And you mix all that together.
it's unrecognizable when you're done. Yep. Okay, so we see a lot of these. I put this under section 28 or 26. I put a question mark in my notes here. Righteousness, right? What is righteousness? Eric, he's whispering back there. He knows. The rest of us know. Lindsay, did you say something?
No, I said right living.
Oh, right living, right? Doing the right thing, okay? And so might makes right in our world, okay? And so here we see the idea of contention. And so if we just do the right thing, is this leak of contention going to continue? It won't. It'll stop, right, if we do the right thing. And the other section I put under was section 7, the human heart self-control. We've got to choose to do the right thing. Any questions or comments? Okay, stop it before it starts. Verse 15, we see he who justifies the wicked and he who condemns the just, both of them alike are an abomination to the Lord. And so we go back and we've talked about verse 13. Whoever rewards evil for good, evil or difficulty will not leave his house. And we look at this verse here. And what do we see here? He who justifies the wicked and he who condemns the just, both of them are like, are what? an abomination to the Lord. Go Genesis 44 and verse 4. Genesis 44 and verse 4. When they had gone out of the city and were yet afar off, Joseph said to his stewards, "Get up, follow the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid evil for good?'" Anybody know this situation?
His brothers are coming to him, and Joseph sent the money back with him.
Okay, and he took he sent his cup with him. Okay, so we see that situation. I thought of that in relation to this phrase here. And so Joseph was trying to do good to his brothers. Did his brothers do anything wrong? No. Joseph was using this as an opportunity to bring them back, right? Got mixed emotions about that when you study that. Was that the right thing? I don't know.
Probably a little bit of getting even too.
A little bit of,
He
yeah.
wasn't going to do them any harm, but he wanted to kind of show them what he had to endure prior to being where he was at.
That they had to jump through some of his hoops. Right? Yeah. So anyway, I just thought that was an interesting phrase I found when I was studying like phrases. Go to Psalm 35 and verse 12. Psalm 35 and verse 12. So when you look at this, who wrote most of the Psalms? David, right? You look at this. They reward me evil for good, to the sorrow of what? Soul. When we look at this, what type of sorrow is this? Is it like, well, bummer, this happens? We're talking about sorrow of the soul. How deep of a sorrow are we talking about? Now, when we think about this, wow, then how much should it grieve us when people exchange good for evil and evil for good? How much? It should, right? I believe that in our nation, because of our culture, we're very lax on it, right? We say, well, that stuff happens, doesn't it? Right? Just a moment ago, even Matt, nodding his head and said he understands that's not a good situation, right? But how many of us are used to it? Almost. Okay. Psalm 38 and verse 20. Psalm 38 and verse 20. While we're here. Those also who render evil for good are they are my adversaries, because I follow what is what? Good. And so I know I've shared this phrase. Brother Elkins, he used to say, he said, right is always right. That's all there is to it. Okay? Simply. All right, any questions or comments? I put this under section 8 for my notes. But think about the nature of God. Okay? God is only good. Does he repay evil with good or good for evil? He doesn't. Okay. Verse 16. Verse 16. We're going to look at verses 16 and 17 kind of together. They're in paragraph, but we'll read verse 16 first. It says, better is a little... Nope. Wrong place. Let me get back to the right page. I was in the wrong chapter. All right. Look at my page. 16. All right, we'll look 16 together here. It's later on. Why is there in the hand of a fool the purchase price of wisdom, since he has no heart for it? In the bottom, let's talk about the bottom of verse 16 first. What are we talking about when we mean the heart for it? What's the heart describing? Our mind, right? Okay. No capacity for it, right? So, our heart, when we think about the parable of the soils, was there different types of soil? Did it affect the seed? We understand that the seed is the Word of God. Where does wisdom come from? From the Word of God, right? We get that. So we see that connection there. And so we see that some people's heart is not the right soil to receive The gospel or wisdom. You cannot receive godly wisdom without receiving the gospel. Right? And vice versa. It doesn't work. You can't receive one without the other. At least to some portion or degree. So, the question is, why is there in the hand, why does this person possess, or the purchase price of wisdom? Awkward silence. How's wisdom come? Easy or difficult?
Through trials.
What's that?
Through trials.
Through trials, difficulties, right? Right? Training. Did Solomon go through difficult times? We understand that God blessed him with wisdom, but was it easy for Solomon to gain wisdom? No, he went through difficulties. So here's the thing. What I thought about was Acts 8. Go to Acts 8. I think we see what I'm getting at here is we started our study in James chapter 1 and verse 5. If any of you lack wisdom, let him do what? Ask of God that giveth to all men in what way? Liberally. Right? So if we think about that, we ask the question, is wisdom a gift from God? It would have to be. Okay? So here in Acts chapter 8, and I think a lot of us are pretty familiar. Eric just taught this, so I won't reteach this. There's no need to. But here you have somebody who's trying to purchase what? Somebody want to read verse 20? Gift of the Holy Spirit.
But Peter said to him, your money perish with you, because you thought that the gift of God could be purchased with money.
Okay. He was trying to purchase the ability to perform miracles and wonders, right? And so, when you think about that, that's a gift from God, wasn't it? One of the miraculous gifts was actually what? A form of wisdom, wasn't it? But here's the thing. What was the problem with this individual's heart? Maybe I should ask that. What was his problem? It was his heart, wasn't it? Okay. He wanted to receive a gift from God and use it for the right reason or the wrong reason.
Wrong.
Yeah. So when you go back to Proverbs and you look at this, I think we see a very similar thing. The fool says they realized that guy that has wisdom, there's benefit to having wisdom. So the fool says, maybe I can purchase wisdom and be like that guy. But the problem is he has what? No heart, right? He can't use the wisdom. Sections we might put this under is, I put here, section 27, joy and fulfilled life, versus section 1, pure wisdom, right? Is the fool going to have a joyful and a fulfilled life? Can you purchase a joyful and fulfilled life? No, you can't do that. So anyway, that's what I put. Any questions or comments?
The ESV says, why should a fool have money in his hand to buy wisdom when he has no sense?
He has no sense.
It's almost like it's saying, what's the point of having wisdom if you have no common sense?
Yeah. You can't even use it.
Yeah, because if you had wisdom, you're not going to know how to use it, so it's having common sense.
If he had wisdom, he'd know he couldn't buy it.
Yeah.
It's just not there. So. All right, 17 said, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. What's the difference between a brother and a friend? You pick your friends. Okay, your brother. We think about which one normally has a closer relationship. It just depends, right? From what I understand from these words, from a study I put in on this, was that what we're talking about is we're talking about the degree of commitment. Okay, that's what we're talking about. And so when we think about that, one quote said, the crisis tests a friend as fire the gold. Okay, and so when we look at this and what we're talking about, A friend loves at all times. A brother is born for adversity. How many of you have Facebook? How many of you have 100 friends? Most of us have 100 friends. Okay. A lot of us have a few more than that. But here's the thing. Think about those 100 people. If you only had 100 people on Facebook and you were going through a really difficult time, honestly, how many of those 100 friends would be the first one you called? And how many of those could you count on? And so what we're talking about is, we're talking about through the difficult times, what do we have here? The relationship is established or strengthened. Okay.
Yeah, we'll say blood's thicker than water.
Blood's thicker than water. You know where that comes from? That was, so I think it's from the Middle Ages. I preached a sermon on it one time. And so I read the history behind it. And so they're talking about the water of birth versus used to be people would cut themselves and make a blood covenant with one another, sign the contract, you know. And so the idea was you may be born from the same mother, the waters of birth, but it's the blood when you decide to agree to make a relationship, a covenant, or a pact, that's more important. And in today's society, we have it the other way, don't we? That when we say blood is thicker than water, what are we talking about? Yeah, our family. But the original phrase started the other way. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, this principle here based upon the word brother, friend, the same idea is that the brother or the chosen relationship to stick together is through the difficult times. That's when it's fostered, that relationship grows. I put it under 16 here, which is, I believe, friendship. Yeah, 16 for my notes. All right, any questions or comments? All right, 18, it says, a man devoid of understanding shakes hands in a pledge and becomes surety for his friend. Some people say this should probably be connected, or maybe not a verse break between 17 and 18. Because though in verse 17 we're talking about the commitment to a friend, right, through difficult times. We say we've been through that and we stuck together as friends and we stayed there for one another like a brother would. It says here, a man devoid of understanding shakes hands in a pledge and becomes a co-signer for his friend. That's what the idea of surety is there. And so here we see 17, we see difficult times will build the bond in your relationship. But the warning in verse 18 is that the friend that's devoid or is a fool, devoid of understanding, will go too far to help their friend. You understand that? That's what it's talking about here. All right, any sections we put this under? I put 1 for wisdom, and I also put 24 for the words of the wise, right? And here, how many of us want to do everything we can do for our friends? Yeah, I do. And I know that most of you, all you do, right? But there comes a point where we say, okay, it's in your hands. And that's what this is talking about. A wise person will say, I've gone as far as I can go with you. Now you have to do the rest on your own. I can't do that for you, right? I can't commit what I can't afford, right? I can't commit to support you in a way that I can't afford. And this principle, we're not just talking about money, right? We're talking about a lot of different ways, right? If we help our friends so much that we neglect our family, is that a struggle? Yeah, it's something we have to be careful of, watch out for. All right, any questions or comments?
The word understanding there is actually the same word in 16.
The 16, yeah.
ESV says sense both times.
There you go, has sense.
That idea of not having understanding.
Yep. The wise man. Verse 19 says, he who loves transgression loves strife, and he who exalts his gate seeks destruction. And so we've talked about this. We began talking about in verse 11, the evil man that pursues rebellion or seeks only rebellion. And so here, what do we see here? He who loves transgression loves what?
Fighting.
Yeah, fighting, strife, quarreling. So we see those two things go hand in hand. So we're talking about someone who likes to practice sin, likes to cause strife. Those that like to cause strife also like to do what? We say, is causing strife a sin? Yeah. Well, we see that there's a problem with the heart is what we're looking at. A problem with the heart. And so in the second half, he who exalts his gate seeks destruction. What's an exalted gate? Sumptuous living, right? High living is the idea. Prideful living, okay? Lavish living. And so all these things, we're not talking about a person that has a humble and mild, a meek mindset. Is not the type of person that's being described here. All right, section 7 and 3, maybe for your notes. Talking about the human heart self-control. You've got to control yourself to not exalt yourself. And then section 3, we see pride here because that's the problem, having an exalted gate. Move on to verse 20. It says, he who has a deceitful heart finds no good, and he who has a perverse tongue falls into evil. And so, what's a deceitful heart? Are they honest? What's that? Lying. It's the opposite of honesty, right? They want to deceive, which is interesting because of what's the last thing we talked about, or in the last verse, what are we talking about? An exalted gate, high living, right? Maybe prideful living, living higher than their means show. And he who has a perverse tongue falls into evil. And so we're talking about some of these sins we see as far as maybe a progression, or that these things go hand in hand with one another, right? When we look at pride, deceit, and perverse tongues do what? They're all connected and fall into evil. And so sections this might go under, that we might want to put it here, is section 11 for the second half of the verse. And then section 26 in opposition to righteousness. All right, verse 21. He who begets a scoffer does so to his sorrow, and the father of a fool has no joy. So what are we talking about? Parent-child relationship, aren't we? And so what does it mean to beget? Born. Okay. The question is, how much of this is developed? Learned traits. Okay. And so he who begets a scoffer does so to whose sorrow? And really, I don't think that Solomon's talking about whether you're going to choose to have children and take the risk or not. He's talking about what we developed, fostered in our homes. Okay. And here he says, does so for whose sorrow? His own, right? I think this is a warning to be good parents. Be careful how we raise our children. It says, and the father of a fool has no what? Joy, right? One thing when we think about 21, or I think about 21, I kind of thought of this. A fool cannot be a Christian, right? A Christian can't be a fool. So when we look at this, this goes as far as talk about the spirituality of our children, right? We need to be careful because there's no joy in raising non-Christians, is there? There's not, so we need to be careful of that. All right, let's look at the next one, then we'll call it a Bible class for the evening. Verse 22, it says, a merry heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. And so when we think about the condition of the heart, we have several here. Section 5 under your notes. And so I think it's interesting when we think about a merry heart versus a broken spirit, and what does it follow? A warning or admonition against for parenting, doesn't it? So I think it's fitting that it falls there. All right, we'll pick up in 23 next week. Any questions or comments? All right, thanks for your time.